Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again it is I, the Immortal Cave, and Stanley Trust.blogspot.ca. As usual, I shall put a link to my vlog in the description. And this is going to be an interesting little one because this is part 2 of my Pokemon retrospective going into Gen 2 and Johto. As is the last time, I shall include my thoughts on the remakes, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, because my favorite version of Gen 2 is Soul Silver. Mostly because it's just the updated version, better graphics, whatnot. For those who have not seen part 1, number 1, go see it. But number 2, for those who have seen it, as you already know, I love Gen 1. I think that that's what got me hooked on it. That's what basically got me into gaming. Love it to death. Now, Gen 2, to give you a kind of a point of reference, Gen 1 was generally loved by everybody. Like, everybody loved Gen 1. And then Gen 2 came out and everybody loved it even more. To the point where I believe, generally speaking, Gen 2 is still considered the fan favorite of Pokemon. Which is why I'm getting my Riot Shield ready, because I'm not gonna lie, I really don't like Gen 2 that much. I don't hate it. There's no Pokemon generation that I really hate, or that I really think is absolutely terrible or whatever, but I just... for clarification, when I was a kid, and I first got Pokemon Blue version, I loved it to death. I got Yellow version, I loved that to death, and then they announced the second generation, and I was just like, yeah, that's amazing. And I got it, and I played the crap out of it. And then I got Crystal, and I think I played that once, and then I was pretty much just done with Pokemon for a while. At least until Gen 3 came out, because I'll give my thoughts on that. But, this generation, like, when I was a kid, I loved it. But the older I get, and the more I start to think about it, I start realizing just how many things in that generation bothered me, and how many things I just don't care about. I mean, it does have a lot of things that I really do like. The day-night system, which for some reason got taken out in Gen 3, I have no idea why. It wasn't really something that I was, generally upset about them taking out. I really didn't care. But, it did feel like a downgrade, so I can understand why people would like Gen 2 so much. I like the day-night thing. I like the radio. The basically Pokegear .5. Or whatever the hell they're calling it these days. C-Gear or some crap like that. I'm having a hard time keeping track of all that type of stuff, so let's just go with it. But, and, it introduced 2 new typings, Steel and Dark, which weren't in the first one, which were really good. Dark types are my first or second favorite typing. They were my favorite typing up until recently, where I started realizing that bug types are pretty badass these days, but, and Steel types are very awesome as well. And, I love those 2 typings. I think that they're both incredible. However, this is where I'm going to start getting into the negatives. I want to go over all the positives first, before I start getting into anything else. Excuse me for a moment, I'm having a slight allergy attack. Okay, sorry about that. When it comes to one of the main positives that everybody always brings up with Gen 2 is Silver, the rival. Everybody always says that he's the first character in a Pokemon game to ever have any type of character development, or to have any, like, big moments. And that's the one thing that everybody always grasps onto, and that nobody will let go with Gen 2. Well, first of all, I'm going to disagree with you on a slight bit there, because he's not the first character to have character development. Technically, that was Giovanni, because you beat him, he decides it's not worth it, and decides to quit being the boss of Team Rocket. Now, would you not call stopping being a crime lord and trying to live a life of peace, or at least a life of something, would you not call that character development? I mean, it maybe not the most advanced type. It's nothing. It's bowling shoe ugly character development, but it's character development. And really, the only real major thing about Silver that I remember being really good character development is after you beat the Elite Four and you go into Kanto, which I'll get to that in a second. After you beat the Elite Four and go into Kanto, you fight him once again, and his Golbat has evolved into a Crobat, which only happens by happiness, which is a really symbolic moment of him, learning that Pokemon are more than just tools, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We've all heard the spiels. If you've watched the anime, you probably know it. Da-da-da-da-da. And I will admit that is a cool moment. But when I get to Gen 5, I'll kind of talk about who I think the best rival is. Hint, it's not Silver. But I get why people like him. It's just that I myself don't get it quite as much. Just because I just find that everybody's freaking out about such a minor thing. Like when I said Giovanni's character development at the end of Gen 1 was bowling shoe ugly, this isn't much better. Because it's literally him just, every time you beat him, saying, why can't I win? My strategy is perfect. Maybe there's something I'm doing wrong. And the next time you do it, it's a little bit more, and a little bit more. It's really simplistic character development. And just the rate at which people freak out about this is just, they overblow it, in my opinion. It really isn't that good. I mean, the fact that there are still people, I'm kind of spoiling Gen 5 here a bit, but the fact that there are still people who think that Gen 2 is better than Gen 5 Gen 5 has theming, for God's sakes. It has not just character development, but it has theming, and it has all of these things, and it's so good story-wise. It's amazing. Gen 2, the fact that people can compare in my opinion, the best rival in the series, Hugh, to Silver, and say that Silver's better, no. I'm sorry. You're free to your own opinion, and if you think Silver's the best rival, all the power to you. If you think Gen 2's the best generation, all the power to you. But just to me, I'll never see it. I'll never see why Silver and his good, if really simplistic character development is better than Hugh and his amazing character development. Also, Hugh's theme's better, but that's beside the point. And the one other thing I want to talk about is obviously the post game. There is still an argument that Gen 2 has the best post game in the entire franchise. Gen 5 puts up a fight for it, in my opinion. But because after you beat the Elite Four and after you beat the champion, you go into post game, which is going to the Generation 1 area, Kanto, beating all those gym leaders, and then fighting the main character from the first game, Red. A lot of people, between Silver and that, is what everybody always rants on about when they're saying how much Gen 2 is better than every other generation. Now, I will admit, putting an entire another gen's area in a game is impressive. I can't lie about that. But I'm going to say this right now, Gen 5 does put up a hell of a fight, because not only can you fight all of the Gen 1 gym leaders, you can fight all the Gen 2, 3, 4 gym leaders, all of the champions from all the different generations, including Red. So it's somewhat negated. There is still something about going to Gen 2 to a Gen 1's area in Gen 2. That is impressive, I can't lie. But, I don't know, it's just, when people say that it's the best these days, I can't see it. And even compared to Gen 3, I actually think Gen 3 is better, myself. Yes, I just said that. But, with that, we come to the bad points. And really, one of the things that always bugs me is when people say that Gen 2 introduced all these new things and the graphics were so much better and, it introduced so much new stuff. Here's my problem. Gen 2, what did Gen 2 introduce? Well, pre-evolution Pokemon, like Magby and Smoochum, and pre-evolution Pokemon that were pre-evolved versions of Pokemon from the first gen. Now, one of the things that a lot of people attack Gen 4 for is having the evolutions like Magmortar and Electivire, who are quote-unquote pointless. Well, here's my argument here. Bringing in these new Pokemon, these new evolutions, there's an argument for that, for bringing in these new evolutions, because it allows these Pokemon to become a little bit more useful. Nobody can tell me right now that they used Yanma in the Elite Four and did well with it. Yanmega, on the other hand, yes. So, I realize I'm getting into Gen 4 here, but nobody can tell me that they're pointless, because you're going to see them. On the other hand, the pre-evolutions introduced in Gen 2 are pointless, because they serve no purpose. Like, everybody can tell me, oh, they're used for egg groups and egg breeding, and I don't give a crap about breeding and, getting egg moves and getting I don't care. Nobody is going to bring a Cleffa into the Elite Four. To me, it's just another stepping stone I have to get on my way to getting to the final version. I'm not going to use a Cleffa. I'm going to use a Clefable. And even then, I'm probably not even going to use a Cleffa. I'm just going to use a Clefairy. So, literally, it's just something I ignore. Because they serve no purpose. At all. What else did Gen 2 bring in? It brought in eggs, which I think is a generally okay thing. I personally don't really care that much. But it's okay, I guess. What else did it bring? The 2 new typings. Which, by the way, there's only, I think, fully evolved 3 of each. And, oh no, actually 4, I take that back. 4 new ones. Magnemite was an electric type in Gen 1. In Gen 2 it got turned into Steel Electric. Which I'm not counting because we already knew this Pokemon. Just adding another type on it does not make it a new Pokemon. But the real problem is the fact that 90% of these Pokemon, of the Dark types that got introduced, and of the Steel types that got introduced, 90% of them you couldn't get until post-game. And you barely saw any of them anywhere else. So, it just seems like they're going, hey, you want these new types, you want these new types, you want these new types, beat the game first. Because you're not getting it any other way. And that pisses me off to no extent, because it just feels like they're just waving the friggin', they're waving the flag in front of me, and then they're just taking it away. Yeah, like that bothers me. And then we have the new Pokemon that were introduced in Gen 2. And there might be like 1 new Pokemon for each route. But for the most part, you're still going to be running into the same guys from Gen 1. Hell, the signatures for Gen 2 gym leaders. When's the first time you actually see somebody using a new Pokemon? I mean, Faulkner doesn't use any new Pokemon. His signature's a Pidgeotto. I don't believe Bugsy did. His signature was a Scyther. So Whitney. who many people consider to be the most annoying gym leader in the entire franchise. And then Morty, whose signature is a Gengar, a Gen 1 Pokemon. So, one of the main reasons I played Gen 2 was to get these new Pokemon. And they almost try to hide them from you. It's ridiculous. I realize I'm exaggerating a bit here, but they just, what new Pokemon they introduced weren't really that good. And then when he started getting into the later things, you'll get some new good ones. Tyranitar. It's actually one of my favorite Pokemon. Credit given. And again, when you could get the new Pokemon, like Houndoom or some of the new guys, I do sincerely, I do like them. Houndoom's one of my favorite Pokemon. Tyranitar is one of my favorite Pokemon. What other Gen 2 Pokemon do I really like? Xatu. I really like Xatu. But it's just the fact that like Xatu, you can only get in an area which is generally hidden. Like you have to, I think you had to use surf in a certain area and then go over and then go through this cave system and pop out in this one little patch of grass that you can see from the beginning of the game, or near the beginning of the game. Walk around there and you can find them. And Smeargles are effing useless. And then there's the evolutions. I didn't bring this up. I don't think I did in Gen 1, but there's a Pokemon called Eevee, which is a excuse me for 1 second. Throat's killing me. But there was a Pokemon named Eevee, which if you gave it a fire, a water, or a thunderstone, it could evolve into 3 different things. Fire, water, thunder would be Flareon, Vaporeon, and Jolteon. And it introduced 2 new ones in Gen 2. Now I'm going to say this right now. Gen 1, I loved Eevee. Gen 2, I stopped caring. Like, they introduced the 2 new ones, and it just felt like they were just tacking them on. And then Gen 4, they introduced 2 new ones. I don't care anymore. Everybody loves Eevee. Oh, it evolves into all these different types. They should make one for every type, and I don't care. They can do it, cool, whatever. If they don't, I don't care. I really don't. But, so, they had the 2 stones. They have a Moonstone and a Sunstone. It's a Psychic and a Dark type. What would they make it evolve by? Why, friendship. And this is one of the things that I really hate that they introduced. Friendship evolutions are... Sometimes they will go incredibly well and they will evolve as soon as humanly possible. Basically, the more potions, the more haircuts, the more whatever you give a Pokemon, the happier they become, and once they hit certain happiness, they'll evolve. Like I mentioned Silver's Golbat evolving into a Crobat earlier. And it's the same thing with Umbreon and Espeon, the Dark and the Psychic evolutions. Here's the problem. I have never been able to evolve Eevee into one of these 2. Never. Because I hate happiness evolutions. I think this is the worst evolution type introduced. No question. Yes, worse than the stupid evolve near a moss stone or an ice stone or in an area. That's bloody stupid too, but just... Oh, I've never been able to evolve an Eevee into an Umbreon or an Espeon. I tried for 3 months straight as a kid, taking Eevee to get a haircut, and then training it, and then giving it potions, and giving it all these things that make it like me more, and never did it evolve for 3 months before I gave up. Let me tell you a little story, actually. Everybody always says that they have the best memories of Gen 2. My memories of Gen 2 involve 2 things. Number 1, dragging my ass through fucking Mount Silver to get a Larvitar, getting it, training that thing up to be a Tyranitar, which took me goddamn forever. And I love Tyranitar, but I'm not doing that again. Number one. And number two was raising a Togepi up to level 61 before the damn thing evolved. 61 with a Togepi. And what was my reward? A Togetic, which is horrible. So, I have two really good memories of Gen 2, and they both suck. So, you'll excuse me if I'm not exactly, Captain Sunshine, leader of the friggin' cheerleader squad for Gen 2, because my memories aren't that good. To me, Gen 2 is that. It's, pointless things getting added in, annoying things getting added in, just things that, that's another thing. In Gen 1, you could just buy the evolution stones at the Celadon department store. From Gen 2, 3, and for the most part, I believe 4 and 5, you cannot buy them. I think post-game, maybe in a few places, you might be able to. But no, you cannot even come close to getting, to being able to buy an evolution stone. And that drives me goddamn insane. Because it just makes certain Pokemon more or less useless. Because I'm not going to raise up an Oddish if I need a Sunstone or a Leaf Stone. I can't buy a Leaf Stone, so Vileplume's out of the goddamn equation altogether. And then there's the only way to get them is by having a phone thing with, certain characters. I don't even care anymore. Like, that just bothered the crap out of me. And one of the things that really bothered me was just the fact that they always tried to rationalize why certain Pokemon evolve now. So, they introduced a new item that you had to give to a Pokemon. Which, by the way, hold items are actually a good thing that was introduced, to be fair. But, Poliwhirl could evolve into Poliwrath with Waterstone, or you could trade it while it's holding a King's Rock. Why do you need to rationalize this? Like, I kind of understand, that's why it didn't happen in Gen 1. I don't care. Just tell me it evolves now. Just tell me it evolves by level. At a certain level, it evolves into Politoed. Or you could give it a Water Stone. And it'll turn into Poliwrath. That makes sense to me. It's just, that's just the one thing. It felt like they were always trying to rationalize it, but it always felt like they were just overcomplicating things. And again, that's Gen 2 to me. It's just overcomplicating things and just all these things. It's a step in the right direction, I won't lie, but it never hit me as good as everybody else did. Everybody else always talks about it. Excuse me again. Not used to talking for this long. When it comes to Gen 2, I don't hate it. I have Soul Silver right next to me. I'm looking at it. I might do a playthrough one of these pretty soon. A playthrough of it because I do like it. It's just that I would play Gen 1 over it. I would play Gen 2 over it. I'd play Gen 2 over Gen 2. I'd play Gen 1 over it. I'd play Gen 3 over it. I'd play Gen 5 over it. And something that's going to piss off a lot of people, I would play Gen 4 over it. Yes. So, it's my least favorite generation. Just because what it introduced wasn't that good. And people always say that, oh no, Kanto's part of the main game. You have to beat Red to beat the game. I'm just like, fuck you. No, it's not. You have to beat the champion, who is Lance. Once you beat him, it goes into post-game, because the credits roll. Once the credits roll in a game, that's post-game. I don't care what anybody says. That's post-game. I don't hate it. I think that everybody overblows it. Do I recommend it? Yeah. Because number one, like I said, I do like it, and, you know, I realize that I'm probably one in a million people who don't like it. So do I recommend it? Yeah. You know, you're probably going to like it. Obviously, Heart Gold, Soul Silver is the best version of it because Gold and Silver are, for the Game Boy Color, and incredibly archaic. But, yeah, I recommend it, definitely. In fact, I'm going to say this right now. I recommend pretty much any Pokemon game. But, I just... I don't care. I don't care about it. It's just the thing. Like, I'll go through it every now and then, but it's just... Gen 3 introduced so many better things. Gen 1 was so good. Gen 4 introduced a lot of... A lot of people say it was pointless. I personally... I'll get into Gen 4 when I get into Gen 4. And Gen 5 blows every other generation out of the water. I'll say that right now that Gen 5 is my favorite. But... just when people say that Gen 2 is the best, it just... I just don't get it. No disrespect. It's a good generation. It's just... A lot of people say that it's their memories. Like I said, I don't have the best memories of it. You know. I don't have that good, strong memory of going through having all that trouble with Whitney and then coming out of it and being like, yeah, that was awesome. I came out of Whitney, I was just like, fuck that woman. You know, you go through her. She has the most annoying Pokemon in the entire game, Miltank with a tract. You beat her, and then she cries and doesn't give you the badge. In fact, come to think of it, Claire pretty much does the exact same thing. So yeah, two of the gym leaders are complete arseholes. Who, you know, are complete fucking sore losers. You know, that's a good thing, right? I'm sorry, it feels like I'm overdoing it a bit, but it's just that I just don't get it as much. You know, again, I've said it like 100 times at this point. I'm sounding like a broken record, but it's a good generation. I recommend you play it. It's just that I don't have those memories. I don't have those incidents. I just think that it does a lot of things wrong with the new Pokemon they introduced. And I think a lot of the things they introduced were just not done that well. Again, friendship evolutions. I still hate them. The luckiest I have ever gotten with one of those is in Gen 5 I raised up by Levani. Which, first two forms, and then first form evolves at level 20, and then second form evolves with happiness. I got lucky because it evolved with happiness at level 21. That's the only time I've ever had good luck with that. Ever. But I don't, it's not me. It's not my generation. You know, and even as a kid, I was starting to get exhausted at this point. And really I only played through Crystal, I think, once. Before I was just like, I'm done for a while. And then Gen 3 came out, and I was, you know, a lot of people were tired of Pokemon at that point, but I kept going. Because I had actually taken, like, an early break from Pokemon. So when Gen 3 came out, I was just like, hell yeah. And I'll get into that next time. But, well, now that I'm done pissing off 90% of the freaking Pokemon fan base, thank you very much. I'm the Immortal Cave and Retrospective.Blogspot.ca, and I'll see you next time, holding my riot shield.